one of my videos, I challenged myself to take an art style from a game artist I love and try and study it using my own limited knowledge of how to draw, telling you what little things I learned on the way to replicate these styles. Of course, splash art from League is actually the work of teams of artists that go through various stages, and the style isn't due to one person like some other games. But I found it interesting how despite so many people working on these designs, they typically look cohesive and in one general style. I'm going to go over all that I learned from studying and challenging myself to replicate this style in my own workflow, to draw this character from Arknights in a semi-realistic style. Or I would have done that if everything didn't go so wrong. This isn't a video of how I successfully drew League-like splash art. This is how I failed to make splash art many times. But eventually I stumbled on a workable system to draw a semi-realistic character. I started off with a sketch based on the compositions I liked most in League splash art. Most of the body is seen to show off the character, and there's usually a sense of depth in these, with something, hands, weapons, objects looking like they're popping out of the screen with some foreshortening, and a blurred background. The character I'm drawing, Penance, has a cool hammer chain flail weapon, so I plan to have it hit someone and have that be the foreground element to pop out of the screen. But it also made a really weird composition. On the left half, the scale had some good foreshortening and overlap with the body, but on the right, like, what is this? It looks too divided from the main bulk of the image. Of course, I fixed all of this later, but that's getting ahead of myself. I also plan to follow the lighting in League splash art. A lot of the light sources are strong, with either a backlight or a front light to emphasize the 3D forms of the face. I chose to do a backlight, much like the reference image, but this was my first mistake, and my first failed attempt at a face. It's always easier to draw portraits with harsh shadows because it decreases the guesswork you need to do when painting the planes. But because there was already a hard light coming from the back, I'm forced to use very mellow shadows to paint the face, basically upping the difficulty a bunch. It also didn't help that I went in blind without a reference to wing it like I usually do, which is a bad idea since I haven't drawn realistic faces in a while. You can see my over-reliance on lines to separate the nose from the rest of the face, which is contrary to the semi-realism style as a whole. In real life, do you see lines between different objects? No. Value and color is what separates things, so when you paint realistically, you can't rely on line work to separate objects like in some other styles. These values I'm using here are too close together, making the face look flat. And you can see my struggle with the lips. So let's try again. This time making an outline of what I need to paint and the shadows that go there. Then I painted the actual parts underneath and erased the line art layer afterwards. Good enough. And I'll even do the same for everything else with the hair and clothes. Every overlapping thing is given its own layer, which is good for when I want to make changes afterwards, or move it around, or liquefy. I'm pretty proud of the clothing here because I was really aware that I needed to use values to separate each fold or piece. For the cloth, a lot of what I did was section off the area I wanted to paint with the selection tool and use the soft brush to make a gradient and a value difference between the folds. Even though there's no line here, this value difference kind of makes it look like there is, which is what I want. I was lucky with this character because since her clothing was already black and white, I didn't have to worry about the color too much, occasionally shifting the hue on the hue ring from side to side. At this point, what I'm really proud of was the gold buttons and accessories. For example, this gold thing here. I just used a soft brush to place some browns and desaturated yellows for the base, and then went in with a bright yellow for the highlights and to again make the planes of the accessory, just like in these splash arts here. And here comes eyes that stare into your soul. I took a look at the splash art again and I realized that these eyes don't even look half realistic. Look, where are the creases, the form, the pupils like in the actual splash art? So I tried futilely to put them on, and the lips are way too small. So let's try, nope, that looks horrible. Let's just give up and, ooh, a shiny chain that reaches out of the frame. But wait, isn't this composition even worse since it's covering the arm? And these buildings are way too saturated and stealing a lot of the attention even though they're simplified. On to attempt 4 of polishing a piece of shit. At this point, this is around 12 hours of drawing by the way, so I'm pretty attached trying to make this work. but sometimes you just need to let go of things you spend a lot of time on and restart. And that's what I did. I kept most of the body, but the face, horrible chain composition, and background just has to go. Meanwhile, I was trying to think of what kind of expression I was going to make her have. The previous stances were supposed to be powerful, she was lifting her weapon, but now without it in her stance, it's kind of neutral. Where should her face point? Left or right? I decided to make her have a melancholy, unsure kind of face to match her passive stance. And I desaturated the colors to kind of make it blue tinted and sad. What if there are storm clouds and it's raining like in the story, and her hair isn't fluffy but slicked down to match the mood? Better, but even though I restarted the face, it still looks pretty bad. So here's the final attempt that actually worked out for me. I stopped trying to draw the face details too early in the process, and I used the thin lines again, just mapping out how big the features are and where they were. And the eye crease is pretty important, so I didn't forget that too. Then I went in and blocked the harsh shadows in one go, then the highlights and the darker shadows. I intentionally made a harsh light splitting the face in half so I can easily define the upper and lower lip, and I didn't forget the eye sockets too. I made the softest gradient to make the cheek and then went in with the eyeliner. And where I was just messing around with the hair last time, I'm going in with what I usually do with anime hair, blocking in the outline, using a soft brush for a gradient, and then blocking in the shadows for the bunches of hair. The clouds are pretty fun to paint once you get the hang of it. I'm using a hard brush for some blocking in, then selecting the areas to add some gradients, and experimenting with the colors with all of the level corrections, tone curves, and color balance. I wanted it to be bluish to match the desaturated tones of the face, with a lot of value variation. Some sparse dark clouds with some light peeking through. And because there is light from the back and I already defined the face, I then put some rim light from the clouds. So essentially, there are two light sources, one from the back and one from the front. That is actually the bounce light, the light from the clouds hitting the ground and back at the character. For the rim light, I used a hard brush and then softened the edges for the light to make it look like it was diffusing around the parts that it hit. Although the clouds are busy, the background overall looks kind of boring to me and flat. I was looking at the event trailers that introduced penance, and I really liked the light peeking through the clouds here. So I used the add layer mode for these beams of light, and to kind of make the picture more interesting and balanced. And now for the fun part. I used add layer mode to brighten the face a little bit, cleaning up the edges, painting over the lines, and adding a few more hair strands. The left hand and scale were left a little rough, but there's a reason for that. Because the image has a lot of different parts for your eyes to focus on, I was intending to blur this side, like the background, to keep the focus on the face and the metal armor. Speaking of, I wanted the metal armor to shine and have reflections, so I went in with the hard brush to iron out the shapes, recoloring these rough outlines with either black or white for some reflections of the clothing and the background. Then I rendered out the clouds with a soft brush. To make the blurred areas, I merged all of the characters' layers and then duplicated and used a Gaussian blur on the top layer. I erased parts of the top blurred layer that I wanted to be in focus, and then erased the bottom layer for the blurred parts. And after so many attempts of the face, 17 hours, 58 minutes, and 41 seconds of pure drawing, not including breaks, over 9 days, here is my attempt at a semi-realistic style. Obviously, don't follow my mistakes like being adamant that the weapon needs to be shown even though it ruins the composition, and don't hold on to horribly drawn faces with the bad assumption that you can fix it if you try hard enough. You just can't. Just look at these. It looks like the stuff of nightmares. It took me so long because I had to redraw a bunch of stuff. But if I just had drawn the final background, face, hair, and left arm on the first try, it would have saved me about 5 hours. Even this final face looks a bit weird, but again, you just gotta know when you need to give up. I know that a lot of my prior videos have a more teaching style kind of thing, but when I was making this script, looking over my past mistakes made me mold way too much. Improvise, adapt, overcome, make it into a video, I guess? The sad thing is that I prefer the look of a full anime style. Like, this isn't bad, it belongs on ArtStation, but I generally like the look of anime more. So I'm just looking at this like, what's the point? Why did I do myself to this? Am I a masochist? Next time, I am back to anime styles because I need some comfort in my life, not more pain. Not this. Anyways, see you.